Welcome back. Lincoln currency. When you hear the words 1 cent coin, most people immediately think of a small, ordinary piece of change, something that you might find rattling at the bottom of a pocket, stuck between the couch cushions, or forgotten in a jar on the kitchen counter. But what if I told you that the story of the 1981 cent coin is far more fascinating than just being a minor denomination in circulation? What if I told you that this single year, this single minting, this single piece of copper-plated history holds layers of stories about design, weight, symbols, political decisions, economic shifts, and collector obsessions, and that for some rare variations and conditions, the value of such a coin has skyrocketed into unbelievable territory, with some reports and rumors pushing figures as high as $312 million in today's market. At first, that sounds impossible, almost like a myth, like something too good to be true. But the beauty of coins and numismatics is that reality often surpasses imagination, because value is not only about the metal itself but about rarity, condition, demand, and the human stories that turn a tiny piece of metal into a priceless treasure. Now let us take a journey back to 1980. The world was at a crossroads of politics, economics, and culture. In the United States, the presidency of Jimmy Carter was coming to an end. Ronald Reagan was preparing to take the White House. Inflation was high, gas prices were volatile, and the world of money was under pressure. For the U.S. Mint, the decisions they made about how to strike coins, what metals to use, and how to distribute them were tied directly to these larger economic forces. The 1 cent coin, often ignored, was in fact one of the most produced coins in history. Billions of them were struck each year, but 1980 was a turning point in composition, design stability, and the role the penny played in daily transactions. The 1981 cent coin features the familiar bust of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse side. Designed by Victor David Brenner in 1909 to honor the centennial of Lincoln's birth, this design became one of the longest-running designs in American coinage. The portrait of Lincoln facing right, with the word, Liberty, to the left, the year of mintage to the right, and the national motto, In God We Trust, arched above, is one of the most iconic images in the world of coins. By 1980, this design had already been in circulation for over 70 years, and it carried with it a sense of permanence and trust, almost as if it was a symbol not only of the man but of the endurance of the American experiment itself. On the reverse side of the 1980 cent was the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo, who was then chief engraver of the U.S. Mint. Introduced in 1959 to replace the original wheat ears design, the memorial reverse depicted the national monument in Washington, D.C., complete with tiny details that included the seated statue of Lincoln inside if you looked closely under magnification. Above the memorial arched the words, United States of America, and just below that, the motto, E pluribus unum, meaning, out of many, one. Beneath the memorial was the denomination spelled out clearly as 1 cent. The simplicity of the reverse belied the complexity of its message, unity, history, strength, and the memory of a president who led the nation through its darkest civil war. Now, in terms of technical specifications, the 1981 cent coin was struck primarily in copper. Each coin weighed 3.11 grams, with a diameter of 19 millimeters, and a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This was actually one of the last eras where the cent retained a high copper content, because just 2 years later, in 1982, the mint would transition the penny to a primarily zinc composition with a thin copper plating, drastically lowering the intrinsic value of the metal. That makes the 1980 penny one of the last of the so-called copper cents, a fact that alone makes it more interesting to collectors and historians alike. Copper has always been symbolic in money. It tarnishes beautifully, it carries a warm tone, and it has intrinsic industrial value. A single 1980 penny, melted down just for its copper, would be worth more than 1 cent in material value alone if laws permitted it. But the real story of value does not come from copper content. It comes from rarity, condition, and the mystique that surrounds coins when something unusual happens in their production. Errors, double strikes, off-center mintings, repunched mint marks, and proof variations can turn an ordinary penny into something extraordinary. Imagine, for example, a 1980 penny struck with the wrong planchet, or struck twice, or bearing a misaligned die that doubled the lettering in Liberty, or In God We Trust. These error coins are the treasures that collectors hunt for, the anomalies that transform pocket change into museum-worthy artifacts. And it is among these rare 1980 cents that the stories of astronomical value begin to emerge. You might wonder, how can a coin minted by the billions ever reach hundreds of millions of dollars in valuation? The answer lies partly in myth-making, partly in confirmed auction results, and partly in the strange economics of collectibles where rarity, condition, and cultural significance intersect. Coins that are graded at the highest levels by professional grading services, coins that are in perfect, uncirculated condition, sometimes labeled MS-70 or Proof 70, can sell for staggering sums. And when these coins also have error characteristics, their prices climb even higher. Add to this the mystique of rumors, whispers in collector communities, and sensationalized stories of record-breaking sales, and suddenly the legend of the 1980 penny worth $312 million is born. Even if we step back and look with skepticism, the truth remains that the 1980 penny, like all coins, carries far more worth than its face value when placed in the right context. For many, the coin is a piece of personal nostalgia, a reminder of childhood, of allowances, of saving change, of gumball machines and candy purchases. For others, it is a window into the history of American coinage, the final years of the copper composition, and the artistry of designers like Brenner and Gasparo. And for a small number of collectors who chase perfection and rarity, it is a potential jackpot, a life-changing discovery waiting in a forgotten box of old coins. When collectors talk about coins, they rarely just talk about the metal in their hand. They talk about history, about the tiny scratches that might make one piece unique, about the way a coin has traveled from one hand to another over the decades, and about the way the light bounces off its surface. And this is where the 1981 cent coin becomes more than just another penny. It becomes a relic of time, a conversation starter, a secret potential fortune waiting to be uncovered. Now, to really understand why the 1980 penny captures so much attention, you have to understand the psychology of coin collecting and the mechanics of the market itself. The numismatic market is unlike almost any other. On one hand, you have billions of coins that are produced for circulation, almost indistinguishable from one another. On the other hand, you have collectors who crave rarity, condition, and stories. When supply is nearly infinite, the only way to create value is through scarcity, and scarcity in coins comes from either flawless preservation or fascinating mistakes. In 1980, the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco struck enormous numbers of pennies. Billions were produced at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, while the San Francisco Mint struck proof coins for collectors. In such massive mintages, most coins are ordinary. But among those billions, errors are born, and those are the coins that collectors chase like treasure hunters. Imagine a coin pressed slightly off-center, leaving part of the blank planchet exposed. Imagine another coin with the design doubled, so that the letters appear to be vibrating. Imagine one where the mint mark has been punched twice, creating a ghostly shadow. These imperfections, far from ruining the coin, are what make it special. In the world of numismatics, perfection sometimes means a flawless strike, but other times, perfection means imperfection, the kind of flaw that is so rare it becomes irreplaceable. And so the legend of the 1980 penny that might be worth hundreds of millions is rooted in this reality. Professional coin grading has turned these possibilities into a structured marketplace. Services like PCGS and NGC examine coins under magnification, checking every detail, assigning grades from 1 to 70 on the Sheldon scale. A penny from 1980 in circulation, scratched and dull, might be worth only its face value. A mint state coin, fresh and uncirculated, could fetch a few dollars. But when you climb toward the highest levels, when the coin is almost impossibly perfect, when its luster shines as though it was struck yesterday, the price leaps dramatically. And if that same coin happens to have an error or anomaly, its value skyrockets. Collectors whisper about record-breaking auctions, and the 1980 penny has been part of these whispers. Some stories tell of error coins fetching tens of thousands. Others stretch into the unbelievable, rumors of private sales where a single coin changed hands for over $100 million, eventually inflating into the legendary $312 million figure that circulates online. Whether every detail of these stories can be confirmed or not, the allure lies in the possibility. Because in the world of collectibles, strange things do happen. Baseball cards, stamps, comic books, rare paintings, all have shattered expectations. Why not a penny too? But beyond the rumors of astronomical values, the reality is still fascinating enough. A typical 1980 penny in circulated condition is worth a cent. But a pristine proof coin from San Francisco, in perfect condition, might be worth dozens or hundreds of dollars. Error coins can bring thousands, depending on the type of error and the demand. Some have been documented at major auctions selling for 5 figures, and this alone is astounding for something that was meant to be worth 1 cent. Every collector dreams of finding one of these coins in a forgotten shoebox, a jar in the attic, or an inherited collection. Now, let us pause and consider the symbolism of the 1980 penny. Think about the face of Abraham Lincoln, a president who symbolizes honesty, unity, and sacrifice, stamped into billions of copper coins that circulated during a time of economic uncertainty in America. Think about the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a monument to endurance, appearing on a coin that itself has endured through the decades. In many ways, the coin is a perfect metaphor. It is small, humble, easily overlooked, but when studied closely, it reveals depth, artistry, and unexpected value. That is why collectors are drawn to it, and why stories about astronomical worth take hold of the imagination. And let us not forget the weight of the coin, 3.11 grams of copper alloy. That weight connects us to history, because the decision to use copper in coins traces back centuries. Copper has been a foundation of coinage since ancient Rome, since medieval Europe, since the early days of the United States Mint. When you hold a 1980 penny, you are holding the final chapter of the copper era of US 1-cent coins. 2 years later, in 1982, the switch to zinc would change the feel, the sound, and the durability of the penny forever. Collectors prize this, because it marks a boundary, a before and after, a line in the sand of numismatic history. As the decades pass, ordinary coins fade into obscurity. They are lost, melted, forgotten. But the few that remain in pristine condition, the few that stand out because of rarity, rise in importance. This is why the 1980 penny has become a legend. Not because every coin from that year is valuable, but because among the billions, there exist a handful that break the rules, that become anomalies, that achieve a kind of immortality. And the more people talk, the more the legend grows, until even the wildest claims of a $312 million penny start to feel like they could be true. When we begin talking about error coins, the conversation around the 1981 cent piece becomes even more exciting, because it is in these small deviations from perfection that massive value often hides. The human eye loves to spot differences, and collectors thrive on finding the rare and unusual among the ordinary. For the 1980 penny, several categories of errors have been documented and are highly sought after. There are double die errors, where the design appears to be duplicated, giving letters and numbers a ghost-like outline or doubling effect. These can sometimes be dramatic, with the word liberty or the phrase "in God we trust" clearly doubled, and other times more subtle, requiring magnification to notice. There are off-center strikes, where the coin blank did not line up perfectly under the die, leaving part of the design missing and part of the coin blank exposed. Depending on how far off-center the strike is, these can range from mildly interesting to jaw-droppingly rare, especially when both the date and mint mark remain visible. Then there are die cracks and die breaks, where the physical die used to strike coins develop small fractures. These fractures transferred onto the coins as raised lines or lumps, giving each piece a unique pattern almost like a fingerprint. To the average person, these might look like random scratches, but to a collector, they are evidence of a rare minting flaw. Another fascinating error type is the wrong planchet error, where a penny is struck on a blank intended for another denomination. Imagine finding a 1980 penny struck on a dime-sized planchet, thinner and lighter, with parts of the design missing because the smaller blank could not contain the full strike. Such errors are extremely rare, but when discovered, they send waves through the collector community. One of the most famous categories that tie into the 1980 era are repunched mint marks. Back then, mint marks were added by hand to the dies, meaning small inconsistencies could occur. Sometimes a mint worker would punch the letter D for Denver or S for San Francisco slightly off-center, then punch again to correct it, leaving a doubled mint mark. These repunched mint marks, abbreviated RPMs, have become a world of collecting all their own, and specialists can spend years cataloging every variation. For the 1980 penny, certain RPM varieties exist that are highly prized, and in perfect condition, they can bring in hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. The auction market itself is a stage where these humble coins transform into stars. Imagine a crowded room, or these days a buzzing online platform, where collectors from around the world bid against one another for a single coin. The bidding starts modestly, a few $100s perhaps, but quickly climbs as serious collectors recognize the rarity before them. Soon the numbers hit the thousands, the tens of thousands, and in some cases, far beyond. The excitement is palpable, because each new bid is not only a measure of monetary value but also a declaration of passion. Someone out there wants that coin badly enough to fight for it, to spend amounts most people would never associate with a penny. This is the power of numismatics, and the 1980 penny has been at the heart of many such moments. Now let's consider the broader context of copper versus zinc, because this detail adds another layer of significance. In 1980, the cent was still made primarily of copper, with that 3.11 gram weight that felt solid and substantial in the hand. But by 1982, due to rising copper prices, the mint transitioned to zinc planchets with only a thin copper plating, dropping the weight to 2.5 grams. This switch not only marked the end of an era but also created a dividing line that collectors pay close attention to. The 1980 penny thus represents the last years when the coin was still tied to the long-standing tradition of copper coinage. In terms of intrinsic metal value, each copper cent contained more than a cent's worth of copper when prices peaked, which is why laws exist against melting pennies for profit. For many collectors, owning pre-1982 pennies feels like holding on to real metal, not just a token. This emotional connection adds yet another reason the 1980 penny stands out. Beyond America, pennies and 1-cent coins have a global story. Collectors from around the world seek U.S. coins, and the Lincoln cent is among the most recognizable. Its design has been studied, admired, and even imitated by other nations in subtle ways. International auctions regularly feature American coins, and the 1980 penny often finds itself shipped across borders to collectors who see it as a symbol of American history and artistry. The coin's small size belies the fact that it has become a global ambassador of sorts, carrying Lincoln's image to every continent. For some, it is their first introduction to U.S. currency, and for others, it is a treasured addition to a diverse collection. And this brings us back to the myth, the almost unbelievable claim of a 1980 penny being worth over $312 million. At first glance, it seems like an exaggeration born from internet hype. How could a coin so small, so common, command a price higher than entire estates, yachts, or skyscrapers? But legends are powerful, and they often contain grains of truth. Somewhere out there, perhaps a unique 1980-era penny exists, so rare and so pristine that its value transcends normal auction logic. Even if no such sale has ever officially been recorded, the very idea fuels imagination. It drives collectors to search, to check every coin carefully, to dream about stumbling upon the impossible. And in the world of collectibles, dreaming is half the fun. So when you hold a 1980 penny in your hand, you might see just a cent. Or you might see a fragment of copper that links you to American history, to the artistry of Brenner and Gasparo, to the economic shifts of the 1980s, and to the treasure-hunting spirit of numismatics. Every coin tells a story, but this one tells many. It tells of the last great age of copper cents, of minting errors that turned flaws into fortunes, of auctions that electrified the collecting world, and of myths that refused to die. And maybe, just maybe, it tells of a hidden fortune worth hundreds of millions, waiting in plain sight for someone to discover. When we begin talking about era coins, the conversation around the 1981 cent piece becomes even more exciting, because it is in these small deviations from perfection that massive value often hides. The human eye loves to spot differences, and collectors thrive on finding the rare and unusual among the ordinary. For the 1980 penny, several categories of errors have been documented and are highly sought after. There are double die errors, where the design appears to be duplicated, giving letters and numbers a ghost-like outline or doubling effect. These can sometimes be dramatic, with the word liberty or the phrase "in God we trust" clearly doubled, and other times more subtle, requiring magnification to notice. There are off-center strikes, where the coin blank did not line up perfectly under the die, leaving part of the design missing and part of the coin blank exposed. Depending on how far off-center the strike is, these can range from mildly interesting to jaw-droppingly rare, especially when both the date and mint mark remain visible. Then there are die cracks and die breaks, where the physical die used to strike coins develop small fractures. These fractures transferred onto the coins as raised lines or lumps, giving each piece a unique pattern almost like a fingerprint. To the average person these might look like random scratches, but to a collector, they are evidence of a rare minting flaw. Another fascinating error type is the wrong planchet error, where a penny is struck on a blank intended for another denomination. Imagine finding a 1980 penny struck on a dime-sized planchet, thinner and lighter, with parts of the design missing because the smaller blank could not contain the full strike. Such errors are extremely rare, but when discovered, they send waves through the collector community. One of the most famous categories that tie into the 1980 era are repunched mint marks. Back then, mint marks were added by hand to the dies, meaning small inconsistencies could occur. Sometimes a mint worker would punch the letter D for Denver or S for San Francisco slightly off-center, then punch again to correct it, leaving a doubled mint mark. These repunched mint marks, abbreviated RPMs, have become a world of collecting all their own, and specialists can spend years cataloging every variation. For the 1980 penny, Certain RPM varieties exist that are highly prized, and in perfect condition, they can bring in hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. The auction market itself is a stage where these humble coins transform into stars. Imagine a crowded room, or these days a buzzing online platform, where collectors from around the world bid against one another for a single coin. The bidding starts modestly, a few $100s perhaps, but quickly climbs as serious collectors recognize the rarity before them. Soon the numbers hit the thousands, the tens of thousands, and in some cases, far beyond. The excitement is palpable, because each new bid is not only a measure of monetary value but also a declaration of passion. Someone out there wants that coin badly enough to fight for it, to spend amounts most people would never associate with a penny. This is the power of numismatics, and the 1980 penny has been at the heart of many such moments. Now let's consider the broader context of copper versus zinc, because this detail adds another layer of significance. In 1980, the cent was still made primarily of copper, with that 3.11 gram weight that felt solid and substantial in the hand. But by 1982, due to rising copper prices, the mint transitioned to zinc planchets with only a thin copper plating, dropping the weight to 2.5 grams. This switch not only marked the end of an era but also created a dividing line that collectors pay close attention to. The 1980 penny thus represents the last years when the coin was still tied to the long-standing tradition of copper coinage. In terms of intrinsic metal value, each copper cent contained more than a cent's worth of copper when prices peaked, which is why laws exist against melting pennies for profit. For many collectors, owning pre-1982 pennies feels like holding on to real metal, not just a token. This emotional connection adds yet another reason the 1980 penny stands out. Beyond America, pennies and 1-cent coins have a global story. Collectors from around the world seek U.S. coins, and the Lincoln cent is among the most recognizable. Its design has been studied, admired, and even imitated by other nations in subtle ways. International auctions regularly feature American coins, and the 1980 penny often finds itself shipped across borders to collectors who see it as a symbol of American history and artistry. The coin's small size belies the fact that it has become a global ambassador of sorts, carrying Lincoln's image to every continent. For some, it is their first introduction to U.S. currency, and for others, it is a treasured addition to a diverse collection. And this brings us back to the myth, the almost unbelievable claim of a 1980 penny being worth over $312 million. At first glance, it seems like an exaggeration born from internet hype. How could a coin so small, so common, command a price higher than entire estates, yachts, or skyscrapers? But legends are powerful, and they often contain grains of truth. Somewhere out there, perhaps a unique 1980-era penny exists, so rare and so pristine that its value transcends normal auction logic. Even if no such sale has ever officially been recorded, the very idea fuels imagination. It drives collectors to search, to check every coin carefully, to dream about stumbling upon the impossible. And in the world of collectibles, dreaming is half the fun. So when you hold a 1980 penny in your hand, you might see just a cent. Or you might see a fragment of copper that links you to American history, to the artistry of Brenner and Gasparo, to the economic shifts of the 1980s, and to the treasure-hunting spirit of numismatics. Every coin tells a story, but this one tells many. It tells of the last great age of copper cents, of minting errors that turned flaws into fortunes, of auctions that electrified the collecting world, and of myths that refused to die. And maybe, just maybe, it tells of a hidden fortune worth hundreds of millions, waiting in plain sight for someone to discover. Every great coin story is not just about the metal itself but about the people who stumble upon it, the ordinary individuals who suddenly find themselves holding something extraordinary. This is one of the reasons the 1981 cent coin continues to fascinate. It feeds into the dream that somewhere, in someone's pocket, in a dusty coffee can, or in an old box of childhood savings, lies a fortune disguised as something so small and humble that most people would overlook it. Time and time again, history has shown that this dream is not impossible. There are stories of coins turning up in the most unexpected places. Someone might purchase a roll of pennies from a bank and discover an era coin worth thousands tucked inside. Another might inherit a jar of change from a relative and find a proof coin that had somehow slipped into circulation decades earlier. Garage sales, flea markets, and estate auctions are famous for yielding treasures when people sell coins at face value, not realizing the rarity of what they possess. And these stories travel quickly through the numismatic community, inspiring others to search more carefully, to examine every coin under magnification, to never dismiss a penny as just a penny. The 1980 penny, with its known varieties and errors, plays perfectly into this narrative, because it is a coin that can still be found in circulation today if you are lucky enough. Collectors thrive on this thrill of the hunt. It is not only about ownership but about discovery, about the moment when you realize that the ordinary object in your hand is actually a rare artifact. Imagine holding a handful of change, sorting through it mindlessly, when suddenly you spot something odd. Maybe the letters look doubled, or the strike seems off-center. Your heart races as you look closer. Could it be? You rush to check reference books, online guides, or collector forums, comparing your coin against known varieties. That moment of excitement, that surge of possibility, is why people collect. The 1980 penny, in all its ordinary copper glory, provides endless opportunities for such moments, because billions were made, and hidden among them are the gems. But beyond the thrill, there is psychology at play. Humans have always attached meaning to objects, especially those connected to money. Coins are tangible, they have weight, they clink when dropped, they wear down with use. Unlike digital money, they carry marks of time and touch. A coin from 1980 may have passed through thousands of hands, carried in wallets, purses, and jars, exchanged at shops long since closed, or traveled across states and even countries. Every nick, every scratch tells part of that story. And yet, some coins avoid all of this. Some survive untouched, tucked away in mint rolls, preserved in proof sets, or forgotten in collections. These survivors are time capsules, pristine examples of a moment frozen in metal. Collectors are drawn to them because they represent perfection, because they are what every coin once was before the world left its mark. This tension between the worn and the perfect, between the ordinary and the rare, creates the marketplace. The vast majority of 1980 pennies are worth only 1 cent, but the rare few leap in value. This dynamic mirrors life itself, where rarity commands attention, and where value is often determined by perspective rather than inherent worth. A single penny may seem worthless to one person but priceless to another. This duality fuels both collecting and the legends of unimaginable prices. The myth of the $312,001,980 penny fits perfectly into this psychological pattern. It doesn't matter whether such a coin has ever actually sold for that amount. What matters is that people believe it could. The mere possibility keeps the story alive, keeps people talking, keeps the hunt exciting. And in a world where so much feels predictable, the idea that a single coin could change someone's life overnight is a powerful and irresistible thought. The broader history of coin discoveries adds weight to this idea. Think of the 1913 Liberty Head nickel, a coin so rare that only 5 examples are known to exist. At the time of its discovery, it was already worth thousands, and today it is valued in the millions. Or consider the 1943 copper penny, struck in error during a year when pennies were supposed to be made of steel for the war effort. Those few copper cents slipped into circulation, and now each is worth hundreds of thousands. These real stories make the legend of the 1980 penny seem not only possible but perhaps inevitable. Somewhere out there, maybe a unique variation exists, waiting to be found. So when you look at a 1980 penny, you are not just looking at copper. You are looking at possibility, at history, at a piece of the American story. You are looking at the face of Lincoln, a man whose legacy continues to define the nation, and at the Lincoln Memorial, a monument to unity and endurance. You are looking at a coin that bridges the gap between the old copper era and the new zinc age. And you are looking at a coin that carries with it whispers of immense value, of secret fortunes, of legends still unfolding. When we step inside the U.S. Mint in 1980, we are stepping into a world of precision, machinery, and human oversight, a place where art and industry collided to produce billions of coins for the American people. The process of creating a penny may seem simple from the outside, but in truth, it is a dance of metal and mechanics. First, copper-alloyed blanks were prepared, cut from large sheets of metal into discs that would become the planchets for the 1-cent pieces. These blanks were heated, cleaned, and polished to ensure uniformity, then fed into massive coining presses where hardened steel dies struck them with images of Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial. Each strike required thousands of pounds of pressure, imprinting fine details into the surface of the copper. In an ideal world, every strike was identical. But no machine is perfect, and no process is immune to wear, and so the story of rarity and error began at this very stage. The dies themselves were works of craftsmanship. Sculptors created large plaster models of the design, which were then reduced in size and cut into steel hubs. From these hubs, working dies were made, and each die was used to strike hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of coins before wearing out. By 1980, dies were punched with mint marks by hand, a step that introduced subtle variations. A slightly crooked punch, a double punch, or even a missing punch could lead to a coin with a unique character. These tiny human touches are what collectors cherish, because they remind us that even in a mass-produced system, individuality can slip through. It is important to remember that 1980 was still the era of copper cents. Each coin weighed 3.11 grams, and that weight gave the penny a distinct feel. Drop a copper penny on a hard surface and it rings with a tone that zinc pennies never quite replicate. Collectors often describe copper cents as having a warmth, a density, a presence that modern pennies lack. By holding a 1980 penny, you hold the essence of that old standard, a bridge to the long tradition of copper coinage stretching back to the very founding of the mint in 1793, when the first large cents were struck. This continuity is powerful, because it connects everyday people across generations. Your 1980 penny carries the same spirit as the coins your grandparents and great-grandparents once used, even if its size and design changed along the way. Beyond the minting process itself, the cultural role of the penny in 1980 was still significant. Children collected them in jars, adults used them for exact change, and they were part of school lessons on saving and arithmetic. People bent down to pick up pennies on the street, reciting the old rhyme about finding a penny bringing good luck. Entire advertising campaigns and charity drives were built around the humble cent, from penny drives for schools to iconic phrases like, "A penny saved is a penny earned." In that cultural landscape, the 1980 penny was not invisible. It was part of everyday consciousness. Today, we may overlook pennies, but in 1980, they were still respected members of the currency family. The spread of myths about valuable coins has always been fueled by stories passed from person to person, by articles in newspapers, by numismatic newsletters, and later by television segments and internet posts. A rumor about a rare coin can spread like wildfire, inspiring people to check their change with new eyes. The 1980 penny became one of those coins, whispered about in collector circles, then hyped in articles that suggested some versions could be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or even more. As the story evolved, the numbers grew larger, until the legend of a $312 million penny emerged. This is not unique to the 1980 cent. Many coins have undergone similar myth-making. The 1943 copper cent, the 1955 double-die penny, the 1933 double eagle, all of them have been elevated by myth as much as by fact. And yet, even exaggerated myths serve a purpose. They keep people interested, they draw new generations into collecting, and they remind us that even the smallest coin might hide a story of immense value. Another dimension to this legend is the role of grading and certification. Professional grading services emerged to bring order to a chaotic marketplace. By assigning coins a standardized grade, they gave collectors and investors confidence that what they were buying was genuine and accurately described. A 1980 penny graded MS67 by PCGS or NGC is not just a coin. It is a documented specimen with certified quality. Such coins command real premiums, because they are rare survivors of a mass-minted year. And if a coin also displays an error, such as a dramatic double die or an off-center strike, the certified grade and error attribution can send its price soaring at auction. The $312 million claim may be hyperbolic, but the underlying truth is that 1980 pennies have indeed sold for remarkable amounts when they combine rarity, condition, and demand, and here we return to the allure of possibility. Every penny you hold could be ordinary, or it could be extraordinary. Every handful of change could be worthless, or it could contain a treasure. The dream that a simple coin might change your life is what fuels collectors and keeps the stories alive. The 1980 penny has become one of those dream coins, a symbol of what could be, a reminder that history, art, and fortune can sometimes align in the most unexpected of places. Behind every coin lies not just the story of how it was minted, but also the stories of the people who collect it, treasure it, and pass it down. The 1981 cent coin is no exception, and in fact, it has become a cornerstone of countless personal tales in the world of numismatics. Collectors often describe their first encounter with the hobby as a small spark, maybe a parent handing them a jar of coins, maybe a teacher using pennies to explain history, or maybe the thrill of finding a coin that looked just a little different from the rest. For many, the 1980 penny was part of those early discoveries, because it was still plentiful in circulation during the 1980s and 1990s, yet distinct enough to catch attention due to its solid copper weight. A young collector could feel the difference between an older copper penny and the newer zinc ones just by holding them, noticing that one rang with a more solid sound, and that subtle distinction was often the beginning of a lifelong passion. There are collectors who remember vividly the moment they stumbled upon an unusual 1980 penny. Maybe it was off-center, maybe the letters looked doubled, maybe the luster was unusually brilliant. That single coin, worth only a cent in the eyes of the world, suddenly became a prized possession. These stories spread in local clubs, coin shows, and later through collector forums online. And as the internet grew, so did the myths. Someone posts a photo of a shiny 1980 penny and asks, "Is this rare?" Replies flood in, some with facts, others with speculation. Soon enough, the legend grows, a rumor here, an exaggeration there, until the idea of a 1980 penny worth hundreds of millions takes root in popular culture. This myth-making is not unique to coins. It is part of human storytelling. We love tales of hidden treasures, of ordinary people finding fortunes in the most unexpected places. The 1980 penny fits perfectly into this archetype because it is so common, so humble, that imagining one version of it being unimaginably valuable excites the imagination. Just as people dream of finding a rare painting at a thrift store or a priceless diamond in a flea market trinket, the dream of the legendary penny lingers in the back of every collector's mind. That dream alone keeps people searching through their change, peering at dates with magnifying glasses, never fully dismissing the possibility that lightning could strike. Globally, the fascination with the American cent has only amplified this legend. U.S. coins are collected worldwide, and the Lincoln cent in particular is instantly recognizable. Collectors in Europe, Asia, and beyond often include American pennies in their collections, not only for their design but also for their cultural significance. The 1980 penny, as one of the last copper issues before the zinc transition, holds special appeal. International auctions sometimes feature rolls of uncirculated 1980 cents, and proof sets from San Francisco find buyers far beyond U.S. borders. In some ways, the 1980 penny has become a cultural ambassador, carrying Lincoln's legacy into collections in homes across the globe. What makes the coin even more captivating is the way it bridges nostalgia and value. For someone who lived through 1980, the penny might recall childhood memories, buying candy at a corner store, saving up coins in a piggy bank, or pressing them into elongated souvenir shapes at a fair. For younger collectors, the penny represents a bygone era, a tangible piece of history they can hold in their hands. This mix of personal nostalgia and historical significance adds emotional weight to the coin, which in turn feeds the sense of value. After all, money is never just about metal, it's about the meaning we attach to it. And meaning, more than anything else, drives markets. Coins are not just bought and sold for their physical properties. They are traded as pieces of history, as symbols of identity, as tokens of dreams. When an auctioneer describes a 1980 penny as rare, when a collector posts online about an unusual find, when rumors circulate about incredible values, they are all contributing to this larger marketplace of meaning. The $312 million myth, whether true or not, has become part of that marketplace. It keeps the 1980 penny in conversations, in headlines, in imaginations, and that visibility ensures that demand remains high. In this way, the 1980 penny is more than just a coin. It is a story that continues to be written every time someone examines their change, every time a new collector joins the hobby, every time an auction surprises the world with an extraordinary price. It embodies the magic of numismatics, the idea that history, art, economics, and human imagination can converge in something as small and simple as a 1-cent coin. And that, in itself, is priceless. When we talk about value in coins, we are really talking about the intersection of economics and psychology, because a coin's worth is never just about the metal it contains. If that were true, the 1980 penny would be worth only a little more than a cent in copper content, and the story would end there. But value is born in scarcity, demand, and the stories people attach to objects. This is why certain coins soar in value while others, though made of the same metal, remain forgotten. The 1980 penny sits right at the heart of this truth, because while billions were minted, the rare variations and flawless examples are what collectors chase, and those rare coins are what transform into legends. Economists often explain collectibles using the principle of supply and demand, but in numismatics, it's never just supply and demand, it's perception. Billions of 1980 pennies exist, yet only a tiny fraction survive in perfect mint state, and even fewer possess rare errors. That scarcity alone raises their desirability, but what pushes them into mythic territory is demand born from storytelling. The legend of a coin worth hundreds of millions fuels hope and excitement, and that excitement becomes demand. When enough people believe a coin might be worth a fortune, they act as if it is, and in the marketplace, belief has real power. Other coins throughout history prove this. Take the 1933 double eagle, a $20 gold coin that was never legally released into circulation. Only a handful survive, and one example sold for over $18 million at auction. Or consider the 1794 flowing hair silver dollar, believed to be the first silver dollar ever struck by the U.S. Mint, which sold for over $10 million. The coins themselves are metal discs, yet their history and rarity transformed them into treasures worth more than mansions, yachts, or private islands. In the same way, the 1980 penny has become a canvas for legend. While no public sale has confirmed a $312 million price, the myth lives on because it feels possible in a world where coins, cards, and stamps have repeatedly shattered expectations. What's especially fascinating is how these myths become embedded in culture, turning into a kind of modern folklore. Just as old fairy tales spoke of hidden treasures guarded by dragons or buried beneath trees, today's legends tell of rare coins hiding in jars of change, waiting to be discovered by someone lucky enough to notice them. The 1980 penny has become one of these folklore treasures. Stories spread across forums, social media, YouTube channels, and collector clubs, each retelling adding a layer of mystery, each exaggeration giving the legend new life. It no longer matters whether every detail is true. What matters is that people keep searching, keep hoping, and keep sharing the story. The psychology behind this is powerful. Humans are natural treasure hunters. We crave the idea that something ordinary can secretly be extraordinary. It's why people buy lottery tickets, why they search through old attic boxes, why they dig into thrift store shelves. The 1980 penny speaks directly to this instinct. Everyone has seen a penny, everyone has held one, everyone believes they might stumble onto something rare. And because it's so accessible, the dream feels close, attainable, almost within reach. That accessibility sets it apart from rarities like the $1,794 or the 1933 Double Eagle, which the average person will never encounter. The 1980 penny, on the other hand, could be in your pocket right now, and that possibility is intoxicating. Even in the collector marketplace, perception fuels reality. An error coin listed at auction with detailed photographs can ignite a bidding war simply because multiple buyers convince themselves that it's worth stretching their budget. Each new bid validates the last, and soon the price climbs higher than anyone expected. This is why coins like the 1980 penny can fetch tens of thousands under the right conditions. And every time such a sale is reported, the myth grows stronger. Someone hears about a rare penny selling for a life-changing sum and assumes it could happen again, maybe even with the coin in their own possession. Thus, myth, psychology, and economics blend together into a self-sustaining cycle. The copper versus zinc distinction adds another twist to the story, because it ties the coin to broader economic trends. Copper prices rose dramatically in the late 1970s and early 1980s, forcing the mint to change the composition of the cent in 1982. That shift made the 1980 penny part of the final chapter of the true copper era. Collectors often value last, the last year of a design, the last of a composition, the last of a denomination. The 1980 penny is not technically the final copper cent, but it belongs to the last full period before the transition, and that alone elevates its importance. It represents not only a coin but an era ending, and eras have value in the eyes of history. The myth of the $312 million penny, then, is not an accident. It is the natural result of all these factors colliding: scarcity, demand, psychology, cultural folklore, and economic context. It doesn't matter if the number is exaggerated. The point is that the story resonates. It taps into the universal desire to believe in hidden riches, in overlooked treasures, in the chance that fortune might be hiding in the smallest of places. And perhaps the most fascinating part is this: even if the legendary penny does not exist, the hunt for it has already created real value. Millions of people have checked their pennies, millions of conversations have been sparked, and thousands of collectors have entered the hobby because of the allure of stories like this one. That ripple effect is worth something in itself, proving that myths can shape reality in unexpected ways. Auctions have always been the great stage where coin legends are confirmed, where rumors of rarity become reality, and where the market decides just how much history and myth are worth. When a rare coin crosses the block, the entire numismatic world holds its breath. Collectors, dealers, and investors gather in crowded rooms or tune in online, waiting to see how high the numbers will climb. Each bid is a drumbeat, each raise a ripple of excitement. And when the gavel finally falls, the result often makes headlines, cementing the coin's place in history. For coins like the 1980 penny, which have been whispered about in myths of immense value, the auction hall becomes the arena where possibility meets proof. Even if number 1980 penny has publicly sold for hundreds of millions, smaller yet still staggering prices have been achieved for other coins, giving fuel to the belief that one day, perhaps, such a sale could happen. One of the most fascinating aspects of auctions is how they elevate ordinary objects into cultural icons. A coin that spent decades unnoticed in circulation can suddenly emerge under bright lights and achieve a price that rivals luxury homes or priceless art. A scratched and battered cent that should have been dismissed as pocket change is instead heralded as a national treasure, simply because of a rare minting error or a quirk of survival. And when the story of that coin is retold in newspapers and television segments, it spreads far beyond the collector community, reaching the general public and igniting imaginations. The 1980 penny's legend follows the same path. Though no one can point to a specific $312 million sale, the belief persists because so many other coins have shown how far reality can stretch. Consider the 1943 copper penny, perhaps the most famous error cent of all time. In that year, pennies were supposed to be made of steel due to wartime copper shortages. Yet a few copper planchets from 1942 were left in the presses, and when struck, they created a handful of genuine copper 1943 cents. For decades, rumors spread that these coins were worth fortunes, and the rumors turned out to be true. One example sold for over $200,000, and another, in pristine condition, sold for more than $1.7 million. Stories like this are the blueprint for the 1980 penny legend. They show that what seems like an impossible dream can sometimes be real. Or take the 1955 double die penny, where the misalignment of the die created a striking doubling of the date and lettering. For years, these pennies turned up in pocket change, thrilling anyone lucky enough to spot one. Today, they are worth thousands depending on condition, and they remain one of the most sought-after varieties in all of U.S. coinage. Again, a simple cent, a coin most people would overlook, became a treasure because of one mistake at the mint. When people hear these stories, it is only natural for them to believe that the 1980 penny could be hiding similar secrets that might make one worth hundreds of millions. The emotional side of this cannot be ignored. Auctions are not just economic events, they are theater. The drama of competition, the suspense of rising bids, the thrill of victory when the gavel drops, all of these elements make auctions compelling, and all of them help fuel legends. When a coin sells for a record, it becomes more than just metal. It becomes a story, a headline, a dream. And those dreams spread outward, inspiring more collectors, more searches, and more belief in the possibility that ordinary coins can hide extraordinary value. The 1980 penny thrives in this environment, because every big auction of a rare coin strengthens the narrative that another hidden treasure might be out there, waiting. There is also the cultural nostalgia that surrounds coins, which adds another layer of meaning to the 1980 cent coins are time machines. They carry the dates of their creation, the symbols of their nation, and the designs chosen by artists to represent an era. The 1980 penny, with Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, embodies the values of its time: respect for history, reverence for leadership, and pride in national monuments. For Americans who lived through the 1980s, it recalls a world of payphones, cassette tapes, and handwritten letters, a world where pennies still mattered in everyday transactions. Holding one now is like holding a fragment of that world, and that nostalgia adds to its perceived worth. Collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying memories, emotions, and connections to the past. The power of nostalgia can be seen in other markets too. Old toys, once sold for a few dollars, now fetch thousands at auction because they remind people of childhood. Vintage comic books, once sold for pennies, now sell for millions because they carry the magic of imagination and youth. The same is true for coins. A penny is not just a coin, it is a symbol of a time gone by, and in that sense, the 1980 cent carries weight far beyond its copper composition. It carries the memory of an era, and for those who lived it or dream of it, that memory is priceless, and so the legend continues. Each time someone hears about a rare coin selling for millions, they are reminded of the possibility that their own pennies might hold secrets. Each time nostalgia calls us back to the days when pennies jingled in every pocket, the 1980 cent becomes more cherished. Each time an auctioneer's gavel announces a new record, the myth of the $312 million penny feels less like fantasy and more like a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. And whether or not that prophecy ever comes true, the story itself has already given the 1980 penny a kind of immortality. For anyone entering the world of coin collecting, the first spark of interest is often ignited by stories of incredible discoveries, tales of coins that seem impossibly valuable, and legends like the 1980 penny worth hundreds of millions. Beginners hear these stories and immediately look at their own change with new eyes. They begin to wonder, could it be me? Could I be the one to find a fortune hiding in plain sight? That wonder is powerful, because it transforms everyday coins from objects of routine into objects of mystery. Suddenly, something as small and ordinary as a penny carries endless possibility, and that possibility draws people deeper into the hobby. The 1980 penny, with its myth of $312 million value, serves as a gateway, not just to numismatics, but to the idea that history is alive in your pocket. The internet has magnified this effect 1,000-fold. Before, these myths spread slowly through clubs, magazines, and word of mouth. Now they travel at the speed of light. A single viral video can inspire millions to dump their piggy banks onto kitchen tables and examine each coin with magnifying glasses. Articles, blogs, and forums echo one another, retelling and reshaping the story, making the myth even larger than before. The $312 million penny is repeated so often that it becomes a kind of digital folklore, passed from one generation of internet users to the next. Even skeptics who debunk the story keep it alive, because every mention ensures that it remains part of the collective conversation. And that is where the myth gains its true power, not in being true, but in being unforgettable. At its core, the legend of the 1980 penny is not about numbers or auctions or metal content. It is about hope. It is about the human need to believe that treasures might still exist in the most unlikely places, that luck and fate can touch anyone, that history is not sealed away in museums but hiding in the palm of your hand. Hope is what drives people to search, to dream, to collect. It is what fuels entire markets, entire communities, entire lifetimes of passion. Without hope, coins are just copper and zinc. With hope, they become artifacts of wonder. And even if the $312 million penny never materializes, the legend has already achieved something greater. It has inspired countless people to start collecting, to learn history, to share stories with friends and family, to see beauty in small things. It has reminded us that value is not always measured in dollars, but in the joy of discovery, in the thrill of possibility, and in the connection to the past. A simple coin, struck in 1980, has become more than just a cent. It has become a teacher, a storyteller, a dream we carry with us. So the next time you hold a 1980 penny, take a moment to look closer. Feel its weight, heavier than the pennies of today. Notice the details of Lincoln's face, the careful lines of the memorial on the reverse, the mint mark that tells you where it was born. Remember that billions were made, but yours is unique, touched by time, by hands, by history. Maybe it is worth only a cent. Maybe it is worth 1,000. Maybe, in some imagined future, it will be part of a story that astonishes the world. Whatever the truth, the value is already there, in the myth, in the memory, in the meaning we choose to see, and that is the real worth of the 1980 penny. Not just the possibility of riches, not just the dream of $312 million, but the way it keeps us searching, hoping, imagining, and remembering that even the smallest things can hold the greatest stories.